Hi everyone, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to work on adding numerical inputs onto our Node-RED dashboard that we can use to change values in the PLC. So let's get started. Let me get out of your way here, and we'll open up WinLadder. And let's hit enter. We're going to add a little logic, but before we do, let's talk about what it is that we want to accomplish. So for this example, let's assume that on the Node-RED dashboard, the numerical input widget that we're controlling is for a PID set point. And we'll say that we want to, in the logic, once we receive the value over MQTT, we want to do some comparison, just to make sure that we've got a valid value, and then maybe do some conversion on it before we pass it on to our actual PIDD instruction. So our PIDD instruction, everything that it uses as far as registers are in floating point. So what we'll do is we'll get a word value from the Node-RED dashboard, check to see if it's within acceptable limits, and if it is, convert the data to a float, and then put that in the register that the PIDD instruction is using for its set point value in this example. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to configuration and Ethernet port 1, and let's go down to our MQTT settings. So I want to subscribe because we're going to be getting data from the dashboard, and again we'll do it all under the same topic, FC6A/data. What I'll do is I'll add another value down here, so a new value, and let's call this PIDD SP for set point of our PIDD instruction. Again, what's going to be coming from this particular widget is a word value, and we've used D2000 and D2001, so let's go ahead and store that in D2002. Okay. So now let's go ahead and write a little bit of comparison logic here just to check the value that we're getting. So I'll go to my Home tab up here, and Advanced and Data Comparison, and I'll do a load compare greater than or equal to. And with the load compare instructions, they're nice because they go right up against the left power rail. You don't need an input to trigger the instruction, which is nice. So I want to compare what? My source is D2002, our PIDD set point that we're getting from the dashboard. And let's say if that's greater than or equal to 0, and let's say if it's less than or equal to, I don't know, let's say 40, just as an example. So load compare less than or equal to, let's drop that in. And again, data register 2002 and 40. So if it's greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 40, let's go ahead and convert that data. So advanced data conversion, and down to convert data type. Let's convert that data from a word to a float. And again, our source is D2002. And let's assume that our PIDD instruction is using, let's say, data register 2116 and 2117 as a float as its set point value register. Okay. So good enough. I'm comparing the data. If it's between and or equal to 0 and 40, I'm converting it from a word into a float and using that in my PIDD instruction for its set point value. Excellent. Now, one other thing I may want to do is, since this is for a set point for PIDD, I may also want to go ahead and publish this value in D2116, publish that so that I can see that on my Node-RED dashboard as well. So let's do that. So let's publish the value of D2116. So I go back into my MQTT settings and publish. Again, it's going to be on the same topic. Let me add a new value, and let's call this maybe PIDD set point actual, because it is the actual value that the PIDD instruction will use for its set point. Again, this is a float, So we'll change the data type to a float. And the data is coming out of a device. It's coming out of data register 2116 and 2117, again, as a float, 32 bits. I'm good with that. Let's OK to confirm all of this, and then we will download this to our PLC. All right. Now, once that's downloaded, let's go ahead and go to a browser and go back into our Node-RED workspace. So we are here in this control flow where we'd put in our start and stop push buttons for our fan. So what we want to do now is over here in our nodes, let's scroll down to where the dashboard section is, and let's grab a numeric. Okay. So let me drag in a numeric there and double click on it to edit it. Now for the dashboard, again, I want to put that in the control group so it shows up in the control section of my dashboard. The size automatic is fine. For a label, let's call it PIDD set point. For the value format, value there is fine. We will have to do some work on this anyway because this is just going to spit out a number. So we'll take a look at that. But we got to do a little bit more work before we send it down to the PLC, but that's okay. For the range, I know we said 0 and 40 in the PLC, but let's make this a little different. Let's say 0 to 100 in, let's make it in steps of 5. You know, in a real world application, you may want to leave the steps at 1 and something else, but, you know, set the bounds a little differently. But for this example, I can do this just for a couple of things I want to show you. All right. The other thing that we want to change is down here where it says when changed, send payload current value. The topic, I want to send message dot payload. Okay. I want to send message dot payload. Okay. Let's click on done. And now one other thing I want to do is let's go all the way to the top of our nodes, and underneath the common section, let's grab a debug node and drop that in and connect it to our PIDD setpoint numerical widget. The reason I'm doing this is I want to take a look and see what the message.payload is, what's coming out of this numerical input, so I then know what we need to do before we send it down to the PLC. So let's take a look at that. Let's go ahead and deploy this. And let me go into the debug section here in Node-RED. Let me delete all of, well, not that. Let me change this from all nodes to selected nodes. Let me uncheck all of them. And again, the only one I want to look at right now is this message.payload coming off my PIDD set point. So let me pick that one. And let's go back here. So now whenever we go to our dashboard and we adjust the values, we'll see what's getting sent right here. So let's look at that. If I go to the dashboard, hey, there in my control section, there's PIDD set point, and let's just bump it up 1 to 5. And remember, we put a step size of 5, so that's why that changed like that. Now, if I go down to Node-RED, back to the workspace, I can see what's getting sent, 5. Okay, so it's just given me the number, and that's okay. But as long as I know what I'm getting, that's the important thing. So now what we can do is we can write a function. So just a little bit of JavaScript in order to be able to send down to the PLC what we need so the PLC can receive it. So let's do it. So I scroll down a little bit here to my function section. I want to get a function node, and we'll drop it in there. That's fine. I'll double click on this to edit it. And again, the on message is the tab that we want. And I'm going to just delete this out of here right now so I can start writing the code from scratch. And it's only going to be 5 lines. It's not going to be too bad. So the first thing that we want to do is let's create a variable. So in JavaScript, when you do that, you type var for variable to declare a variable. And we'll say that our payload is equal to message.payload. Okay? So what's this doing? It's giving us a variable called payload and it's going to contain whatever message.payload was. We just looked at that. That's just the number, right? We saw that number 5. So what we're going to get in payload is a number. Okay, so this will be just a number. All right. Next, let's create another variable, and we'll call this topic. Okay? And what's the topic that we are subscribing to? I'll put single quotes here. It's FC6A /data, right? That is the topic that we're subscribed to. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and define another variable, and we'll call this message. So a variable message, and I'm going to set this equal to, so this is going to be like a JSON format. So I want an opening squiggly and a quotation mark. And what do we call it? Do you remember? So what we called it was PIDDSP. This is what we're sending down to the PLC for the set point. And we said in the subscribe section in our MQTT settings, we called it PIDDSP. So we've got a quote, PIDDSP, end quotes, and a colon. Okay. And then what do we want? We want to add, so you can put in a plus sign. And then what do we want to add to this? The value, which is the payload, right? And then we want a closing squiggly bracket. So like we said, we looked at this message.payload. When we just looked at it, we saw that was a number, right? So payload will have a number coming from that numerical input. Topic, we just defined this as just static text, right? This is the topic we were subscribed to. Our message is going to be in JSON format. Again, it's going to be the name, PIDDSP, again, in quotes, colon, and then we're going to tack on the payload, the number. All right, so far so good. I'm going to create one more variable, and we're going to call this, what do we want to call it? Make it short and sweet. Send. This is what we're going to send down to the, or push out to our MQTT output node. Send, and we're going to say this is equal to, and we're going to do an opening squiggly payload colon message. So our payload that we're going to send is going to be this. Okay, it's going to be this whole message. And then we'll say our topic is going to be our topic. Okay, and close squiggly. And then we want to return, what is it we want to return? We want to send out of this function, return, we want to return send. Okay, so this is what's getting sent out of the function. Let's walk through this just one more time. I'm sure I'm beating a dead horse, but just to make sure you understand this, because if you understand this, then you can use numerical inputs for anything, for any topic, and any message in the PLC. Okay? So again, we're getting message.payload, which is just the value, the number. We're storing that in a variable called payload. We're creating a variable we call topic, and we're just assigning the topic that we're subscribing to. We're creating a variable message. Okay? We're creating this in JSON format, open and close squigglies. And in JSON format, like we've looked at, we've got to have a quote, the quotes, and then the name that we're going to send this to. And then we want a colon and a plus sign will append the payload, the value. And then the actual JSON message that we're going to send out, the full message, includes both this message and this topic. And we're sending that out of the function. All right. I think I beat that horse enough, and I hate to say that. That's a horrible thing to say, but we've beat this topic to death. All right. Let me click done. All right. So now what I want to do is I'll go ahead and connect from my PIDD setPoint numerical widget to my function and connect my function to my MQTT output node. Okay. Let me go ahead and deploy this. And I'm still in debug here. So let's check, again, selected nodes. Okay, this message payload is still selected. So now when I go to my Node-RED dashboard, let me change this to 10. Okay, and you can still see the payload coming out of there is still 10, right? If I want to see what's coming out of my function, I can take that out of there and connect it to my function. Okay, just moving this debug node over so I can see what's coming out. Go back to our dashboard, change that to 15. Okay, and there you see the message that's getting sent. The message is in JSON format with the name, colon, and then the value. Okay. If I want to look at the complete message that's getting sent, I can double click this message.payload debug and change this to complete message object here. Okay. So now I'm not just looking at the payload, I'm looking at the entire message object that's getting sent. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and delete that. So when we come back, we'll have this value there. Let's deploy this and go back to Node-RED, our dashboard. Let me drop this back down to 10. Go into Node-RED. And now I've got the complete message object here. Okay. So you can see that the object has a payload of PIDD:10. You can see the topic is FC6A/data. So that's what's getting sent to our PLC, okay? This entire JSON message. All right? All right. So let's check just to see if that's working, because this looks all great and the dashboard looks like it's happy, but let's see if it works. So let's go back into WinLadder, and I'm going to go into monitor mode. And would you look at that? So I'm in monitor mode. I can see a value of 10 here in D2002. It's between 0 and 40, so it's getting converted from a word to a float, and it's getting passed as a floating point value into our PIDD instruction set point register. Awesome. So that's working. This is great. Now let's go back to our Node-RED dashboard, and let's go ahead and bump this up a little bit. Let's set it to like 70, right? So this value is outside of the range that we wanted. So let's just make sure that our ladder logic is working. And it is. You can see a value of 70 in D2002, right? The last value that was passed into our PIDD instruction was 40, right? Because as we clicked through that numerical input, we went from 0 all the way up to 70. The last value that it saw that was in this allowed range was 40, and that's what it passed through there. Okay? So fantastic. That is working just as we wanted. That's great. Now let's do one more thing. Like I said, we wanted to monitor what the PLC is actually seeing on the dashboard. So let's do that. So let me go back into our monitor flow here. Okay. And really all we want here is just another text display to show the value of our PIDD set point. Okay. So let's go down to our dashboard. Let's grab a text node. And I'll bring it in here. I'll double click to edit it. Again, for the group, we want this to be in our monitor section on our dashboard. For the label, let's make this is our PIDD actual set point. Okay. The value format is message.payload. That is okay. No, it's not. We need to change that just a little bit. Remember, if we go in here to strip out the value, remember what we've got to do. At the end of the payload, if we put dot PIDD SP actual. Again, that's the name that we called it when we defined it in the MQTT settings. right? So we can strip out the value by doing that, and then we can show the value however we want. Just pick whatever one of those you want. I'll leave it at the default label value. That's fine. Okay, let's click Done. And let's go ahead and tie that to our MQTT input node here. And let's deploy this. Now if I go to my Node-RED dashboard, there we go. So in my control section, I can see my PIDD set point that I'm trying to set. Down here in my monitor section, I can see my PIDD actual set point is 40. So let me change this just a little bit. Set that on 25. And there you go. So we are reading and writing data to and from the PLC. We can see that the PLC is communicating. We've got various ways to show our data. We can show it numerically. We can show messages. We can show numerical displays. We can do numerical inputs. We've got control buttons. So we've got a lot here. So I hope this has been beneficial for you, and thank you for joining.